Firstly, congratulations, Shonali, and this is truly an honor for me to kind of, introduce your book and launch your book. I absolutely was grabbed by the title when I first read it. I just thought I had to read it. It had me written all over that cover for some reason. When you talk about my films and affluenza, well, that's been a criticism that I've, combated all my entire career, because everyone says, that he makes films about first world problems, and, like the fact that Ranbir Kapoor has a private plane, his heart shouldn't be broken at all. So apparently, if you're wealthy, you're not allowed to have any pain. I have, because I was raised in a certain atmosphere, and there was also an aspiration that was attached to my way of thinking. So I always thought cinema was meant to be larger than life and, create set pieces or create characters that were aspirational. Somewhere down the line, of course, cinema syntax changed, and I have to kind of adapt to that to make sure that our characters are more rooted and more real, and they don't seem so flighty like many of my characters have. So I've been accused of affluenza, but having said that, I'm proud of just the fact that I won't. What do I say? I won't apologize for the films having made, but I think I may have to tweak the levels of affluenza in the future.
Well, I only meant it as a compliment. I think the films are great, but good to know.
Oh, that was a compliment. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I totally missed that. I'm not used to being complimented, so my guards are always up a little bit.
This one's going to be easy. Trust me. Trust me. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the book. It deals with so many different things. And for those of you who haven't read it, you will find it extremely exciting in terms of the themes that you see. There's love, there's marriage, there's lots of infidelity, there's loyalty, there's royalty, there's a whole bunch of very exciting things that Shonali talks about. And I just wanted to understand a little bit from you, from the both of you. Can we talk a little bit just about relationships today? About the institution of marriage, perhaps, and is it on shaky ground from what we see in society, from the kinds of things that Shonali touches upon in this book? It's obviously something that's changing a lot and evolving a lot over time. Can you tell me a little bit about how you guys see it, especially amongst the crazy rich Indians? Is the sanctity of marriage at all in despair?
I think the lady who's married must answer that question,
smart.
because marriage is unfortunately not part of my roster in life.
No, but love must be.
We'll be talking about that, let's say.
I think, why don't I read a little excerpt from the book to set a tone for what marriage is according to affluenza and what marriage is in this so-called wealthy class of society. That, I keep getting asked by the media, why have you chosen to write about the 1% of the upper crust of Bombay? But I mean, that's what you see around you, and it's easy to, it's familiar. I mean, we don't think of it as upper crust as such, but we think of it as people with lives and problems. So I'll read a quick excerpt. For those of you who haven't read the book, will then have an idea of what it is about. And I need my reading glasses for that. Actually, before I start, I want to also say that I really, really wanted Karan to launch my book. Divya knows about that. I think as soon as the book was out, I said, let's not do a launch unless we get Karan. And then she asked me why. So,
yeah, because I've been married many times. And I know exactly what it's all about.
So the fun thing here is that Karan has had a greater influence on my life that he has an idea about. And so I don't know if all of you know over here, I started my career with the Asian Age as a journalist. At some point, I switched into Copcom and PR. And I floated a really successful PR company with my partner of that time over there, Parul. It was called Spin Doctors. And we were doing really well. I mean, we were doing so well as 20-something that we didn't know what to do with our money. So we used to keep lying and bunking work and saying, Ferragamo wants to meet us in Italy, so we are going for a meeting and bunk on a client and those kind of things. We used to go off on holidays. And then at some point, IFA Awards was one of our clients. And they obviously wanted us to fly down for the Malaysia Awards. And I was standing backstage. And I think there must have been a troubled expression on my face. I couldn't assess my own feeling, but there was some disenchantment in me. I hadn't spelled it out to myself. And Karan walks up to me and says, are you happy doing what you're doing? You're not looking happy. I know you don't remember this. And he said that, and that made me realize that I was indeed, this is 19 years ago. I've just revealed our age. So I then realized that I really must be unhappy if it is showing my heart wasn't in it in spite of the success of the business. And within a few months after that, I actually, sort of changed tracks and wound it up. Then the second time he left an impression on me, I mean, aside from his movies, was that I was pregnant with our first child. She's here somewhere, Zara. There she is. She's also 16 plus now. And during my pregnancy, I had bumped into Karan at a party or two. And then I delivered her. It was one of my earliest outings with a girlfriend at Olive. Zara must have been 4 months by then. And I thought I was doing well with the weight loss. So Karan, Manish and Shahrukh were sitting at a corner table and eating, and they both waved at me. And so I waved back. And then Karan did like this. So I said, 4 months. So Karan and Manish both sort of congratulated me or whatever. So anyway, the meal got over and I had to pass by the table. I stopped by to say hello to them. And Karan says, so 4 more months left to deliver. And I remember Shahrukh was eating some chicken cutlets or something and he gasped and choked on it because I was mortified. And needless to say, I joined the gym the very next day.
Oh dear, I'm so sorry about that. But how would I have known now your trajectory, your pregnancy and delivery? It was not really top on my agenda, I'm sure.
I know, but I clearly was still looking
well,
very
as long
pregnant.
as it motivated you, look great today. So that's
Thank
what
you.
matters. God, I'm not good for anyone's morale, I suppose.
Well, I switched careers, I lost weight, so I
was actually waiting for a really inspiring story that I must have said, this is what I have done on that day. All right, just read your book, Shonali.
Okay, anyway. Okay, so I'll take off from the point in my book where there's this, the protagonist called Natasha. And Natasha is married to a guy from a princely family, but he is an architect now. Because as we know, there isn't a lot of money, but only titles with the royalty in India now. So Natasha has been ambushed by her best friend Trisha, who Natasha accidentally caught having an affair. I mean, she ran into her at a supermarket where she saw her with a lover. And Natasha seriously disapproves. So Trisha has sprung a surprise at Natasha and is taking her somewhere. She won't tell her where. So she says, am I going to come back from this alive, Trisha? I ask only half jokingly. Trisha laughs enigmatically. We drive through BKC till we finally reach the Trident Hotel. Trisha ushers me into the elevator from the lobby. Why are we going to a hotel room? What are we going to do over there, Trisha? She says, patience, my dear, all will be explained. The lounge is deserted, this is the Trident Lounge, is deserted except for an undistinguished looking man perched on the edge of the sofa by the window. A sickening feeling flutters in my stomach. His jeans, the polo shirt worn with the collar up, the dark glasses and the seriously dandy shoes, flashing the LV logo, all have Vasant Kunj, New Money, New Delhi written all over them. The rest of him, however, belongs to Punjabi Bagh. He isn't entirely unattractive. You can see him appealing to Imran Hashmi's fan base, for example. He is the same height as Hashmi too, I note. Other than the momentary sense of having my curiosity sated, seeing, this guy's name is Guneet, seeing Guneet there is 9.5 on the Richter scale of bad surprises. How utterly daft of me to not have seen through Trisha's plan to get me on board her affair. Oh, I'm going to be in so much trouble if this gets out, because she's worried her husband will find out. I dart a nervous look around the room, feeling ridiculous as there was only Guneet in it when we entered and the door hasn't opened since. Preparing to shake hands coldly and making a quick escape with or without Trisha, I see that Guneet is awkward about meeting me as well. His voice trembles on introducing himself. I can't bear to be cold. God, I hate how soft I am. I not only just smile brightly at him, but the next thing you know, I'm making conversation. Where in Delhi do you live? I ask, mentally high-fiving myself for my finely tuned skill at matching shoes to postcodes, when he confirms my suspicion of Vasant Kunj. And how often are you in Bombay? I ask him, only realizing after the sentence is out of my mouth that I'm basically asking him how often he bonks Trisha. I'd say about once a month. But now, after meeting her, he says, shooting Trisha a meaningful look, I've started coming more frequently. Then he smiles, and Trisha smiles too, and I feel unwell. And is your work hectic, I ask, keen to keep to this topic? Well, I'm an exporter, so it depends on the season. Guneet apparently has nothing to ask me, and I daren't ask a question to which the answer might somehow be having sex with Trisha. So the conversation languishes and is replaced by benign smiles as we sit there looking at the carpet as though it were a Gaitonde painting. What does one talk about under these circumstances anyway? I can't ask about his wife in New Delhi. Guneet is married to. I can't tell him what a fine man Trisha's husband Nakul is. So I sit there annoyed, playing absent-mindedly with my gold chain. Trisha speaks very highly of you, Natasha, he suddenly says to me, turning towards Trisha to seek acknowledgement from his girlfriend. She gives him an approving smile, almost like a mother encouraging her child to go on with his poetry recitation in front of her club friends. I tell her she is lucky to have a confidant in you, Natasha, he adds sincerely. I smile nervously, really not wanting to inhabit that role. Tea is served, and though I don't usually touch caffeine after noon, stirring and sipping at least gives me something to do and is less awkward than just sitting there smiling. After the server leaves, Guneet reaches out for Trisha's hand and casually caresses her slender, manicured fingers with one hand while sipping his coffee with the other. Oh my God, is he going to just mount her right here in front of me? I gulp a mouthful of tea, which is still too far hot and burns the roof of my mouth. He's sweet enough, but let's face it, he isn't half the man Nakul is. Anyway, so.
Fantastic. Well, that's a very fun and juicy passage from the book. Let's talk a little bit about what you just talked about now, Shonali. Obviously, there are cases of cheating all over, and we hear about them all the time. But is there a double standard, do you guys think, when it comes to cheating? Is it more acceptable when an older man leaves his wife and kids for a younger woman, and not so much when a woman does the same thing for a younger guy? What do you guys think?
I mean, firstly, to address, you brought up infidelity earlier, and I actually made a film on the topic in 2006, which was 13 years ago, and I remember it was like, it had met with so many polarized responses, and it was very traumatizing for me because I came out of Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, which was all about loving your parents, and this was all about leaving your wife. So it was a kind of a digression from what I had done, and I still remember the night that the film had actually paid previews of, and I went to IMAX Vadala, and I was standing there, and I was standing there very nervous, and there was a scene where, the lead characters, Shah Rukh and Rani, check into the hotel, for extramarital fun, and there was a very traditional looking couple sitting in the audience, and I was sitting right behind them, and the wife looked very traumatized when that happened, and the husband just tapped her and said, "Don't worry, it's a dream sequence." And when he realized that, no, this was a legit situation, it was not a dream sequence, they looked at each other angrily for some reason and then got up and left. And when I stormed out of that, because I was so nervous, I saw a lady crying, like a young girl weeping by a pillar. And her mother walked up to me, and I thought she's coming to give me a hug, because the girl was so affected by the movie or whatever. She said that, tumne banaya picture? So I said, haan. So she said, I brought my daughter out after a divorce, to give her a good night, to show Karan Johar film, and this is what you have made. So then I realized that actually we do brush the phenomena of infidelity as rampant as it is around us. Like I was told, you've endorsed infidelity with that film, but I'm like, you cannot endorse something that's already sold out. It's rampant, it's around us, you can choose to believe it or not, that's up to you. If you're going to brush it under the carpet, it's your carpet, you deal with it. Because let me tell you, everyone around us is a subject of this phenomena, either in it, going through it, suffering from it, recovering from it, or indulging in it. It is happening. It's there.
Or know someone that it's happening to.
Oh, sorry?
Or at least know
definitely
somebody.
Know someone. How could you not know someone who's having an affair? You have to know them. And I'm not saying that it's the right or the wrong thing. These are human reactions. I mean, these are human emotions, and they are out there. When you talk about what you asked about the double standards, so there is a certain level of hypocrisy that surrounds us. And I find, if you ask me, I find that hypocrisy very high in the highest levels of society. It's very surprising. You would think that intellectuals, affluent, educated men and women would actually have a broad mind to so many things, and you'll be surprised that that's not true. You know, sometimes I wonder what they do with their degrees and what they do with all their achievements and what they do with their international achievements when they cannot accept simple facts that sometimes love doesn't come with an age, love doesn't come with a sex, love doesn't come with any criteria but love. And you've got to accept it for what it is. And I just believe that we are, sometimes the affluenza and the affluent society can be much more hypocritical than people of lesser income in our land and our country.
Yeah, well said, I think. Very well said. Yeah.
And I loved your movie, by the way. That film, I told you even at that time.
Yeah.
That's the third reason I had you here.
Oh, that's the third reason. That's kink.
Well, Divya, I want to say something here. I think that the inherent problem is with society not wanting women in desire to be to be used in the same sentence, okay? So the fact that a woman will look outside of marriage, whatever her circumstances be, it will be discouraged because it's somewhere acknowledging that she is an individual with desires. So a male desire is respected. You know, men get bored easily, a man wants an outlet, come on, blah, 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 blah. The physiognomy of a man is like that. But with women, we have to actually just basically overlook anything except the traditional role, which is the patriarchal role enforced upon us, to be there only to please the man who has chosen to take care of us for the rest of his life. So that's
full of depth and very insightful. And one of the topics, Shonali, that you've talked about quite a bit is the idea of whether women can actually have it all. And you've talked about that wonderfully in the book. Can you tell us a little bit about that in the context of this?
So, you know, I think there's this whole wave of misunderstood feminism which says that you can have it all today. Do you want some water or something to drink? Okay. You can have it all today. So you can lean in, like Sheryl Sandberg said, at work. You can have the perfect marriage. You can have the best bodies. Your derriere can look like Beyonce's and your thighs can look like Kim Kardashian and so on and so forth. But I think by accepting this, we are actually making it harder for ourselves. This is again this, we can't really have it all. Let's just face it and give, either make the most of what we can give our best to. Because when you give too many hours at work, you realize your kids are neglected. And when you give too much time at home, the way it happens with Natasha, you realize that your own identity is now subsumed in your role as a wife and a mother. And I don't know how it's working out for Karan as a parent and a career man and everything. How is it working out for you?
No, but it's not easy. I have to say, it's, there is a balance. That, like, to answer your question, that there's no such thing as having it all. Because that's a point that's very subjective. I mean, there is like, what is all to me may not be all to you. And, so it's like, there's no, and I think it's very boring to even say, I've never met a single person, if I was to hire you, and very rarely you'll find a person, I'm very happy. You don't hear that. And even if they're saying it, I think they're lying. So there's no such thing as a constant state of satisfaction or happiness, and that's okay. You're meant to go through your days, your ups and downs in your day, and it's okay. And like you brought up me parenting at this age, and it's not been easy. It was tough, but it's something that I really wanted, and I feel much more complete today as a result of it. And I think that's what really matters. And I think time management is really overrated. It's really overrated. I think 24 hours are like a lot for you to do, a lot to sleep, to exercise, to love, to work, to do everything. There's a lot of time. I think we always give too much emphasis on there's no time. There's a lot of time. What are you doing half the time? There's a lot of waste that you kind of land up doing in things.
I'm on Instagram.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. If you just cut off like X amount of things, you'll have a lot of time, to give the loved ones a lot of time. Because I believe, like, people ask me, you do so many things. And I'm like, that's because there is a lot of time in a day. You've got to leverage that.
Fantastic. Aren't you on your way to the airport right after this?
Am I going to the airport? Do I look like I'm going to the airport? No. No, I'm not.
This could be your airport look.
No, not going to the airport. I mean, though flying is much faster than driving in the city, I can assure you.
That's true. So another few issues that you've talked about in the book, Shonali, are obviously the lifestyles of the rich and famous as we know it in Bombay and Delhi and cities like that. Tell me, is high society in Bombay and Delhi, as you say, just getting Botox and spending their time on Instagram and shopping online as a result of filling some sort of void in their lives?
You're asking him or asking me?
I'm asking the both of you.
So, firstly, high society in Bombay is very different from high society in Delhi. We can't even hold a candle to that, that sort of society, okay? I think that their morals are far more flexible, spandex in their morals, and which is fine. I'm not judging it. I'm just giving an observation, sharing an observation. And I mean, they live in farmhouses, and you know, they wake up at 5 in the evening, go to the gym, party, then again sleep, and kids. I mean, that's what I've seen from fairly up close. I think in Bombay, the commute and the stress of living in the city sort of makes us a little more responsible and little less feudalistic in the way we live. And I mean, each to their own, really. I think if people want to do Botox and fill up their faces with fillers and go and shop online, why not? They're not hurting or harming anybody. Whatever rocks your boat, each to their own, really.
I also believe that it's important to surround yourself with the kind of people that can make you a better person. And I think that if you surround yourself with those people and you're going to be dressing for them and filling your face for them and doing all that, then, you know, those are not true friendships. Those are frivolous friendships, and those are seasonal friendships. So I think sometimes in life it's important to go back to the people who are like your family, your close friends from the past, be it school, college, you know, your childhood friendships that really keep you grounded, that can actually kind of love you for who you are and not what you want to be given the certain circumstance that surrounds you. Social media does have its pressures, but I think you can't live your life by those norms. I feel very bad for men and women who actually are changing themselves to please others. It's important to kind of make whatever change to make that peace within. You know, I mean, I don't judge anyone who kind of touches their face or, you know, does some kind of body sculpting, because if that makes you feel good for yourself, do what you need. But if you're doing it for X, Y, and Z so that they can love you and they can kind of lust for you, or they can admire you and they can think that you're looking hot, if you're doing it for them, then why are you doing it at all? Because, you know, I've always believed that, at least I'd say for myself, that my life decisions have been for myself and for what I think is correct for me in my life. I don't think you should look at what your neighbor thinks or what your friends around you think, because then those are not friends. If you're looking at how many likes your picture has on Instagram, then you do not have a life.
This especially applies to all the young children in the room, which would be my children.
No, and I think that the sad thing is that it's resulting in a lot of things like teenage depression and, you know, self-worth taking a big beating. And I think that we take these things lightly, you know, because I'm like, a lot of them are suffering as a result of it. And this was never the case. This is not how we were brought up or not how we were raised. There wasn't something like Instagram at that time, and thank the Lord. Imagine, I anyway had problems in my childhood. Imagine if I had Instagram sitting on my head, I would be totally traumatized.
Yeah, I had like unibrow. It looked like there was a big caterpillar here till I was like 18. So. Yeah, we were very different, but the thing is, it's also unfair to compare them with our generation because of the pressures like Karan mentioned. And I even see that in full-grown women in their 40s, that they can't repeat a dress because their Instagram has a picture. I think that is another thing that, again, you're looking for validation from outside, really. So that is something to really introspect about.
Do you, Karan, you of course grew up in the city and you grew up in a filmy family. Can you tell us how much
South Bombay, don't forget.
And so, hey, let's not diss on South Bombay. We've already done Delhi. So tell me a little bit about how much things have changed. How have you sort of witnessed Bombay society change, or do you think it's just more of the same? It's just a different platform, a different level,
Well, in a sense, I feel like the Sea-Link, because when I grew up, I stayed in Malabar Hill for 26 years of my life, and then I moved to Bandra for the remaining 21 to be exact. And I just feel like when I was in Bombay, that South Bombay, was a totally different world, you know, than what it is today. It's much more crowded, and it was much more, there an old world charm about it. You know, there were people who came from old money and had their own kind of, you know, charm and self-worth and, you know, flamboyance that was unique to them. I see that slipping away, being replaced by, you know, the modernity of things. When I moved to Bandra, you know, it was a totally different hub. It was a bunch of self-achievers with the suburbs, this part of the city, Bandra and Juhu and beyond. There was a lot of self-achievement. There was a lot of hunger to achieve. There was a lot of individuals who made it on their own steam and not from family lineage or money. So literally across the Sea-Link, I saw two different spectrums. I saw, like, for the lack of a better way of saying it, the so-called nepotistic gang that were actually leveraging parental wealth and status. And then there was like the single achievers who were who had moved in from elsewhere, you know, from other cities, moved into Bombay and were really trying to make it on their own. And now the Bombay that I know and where I'm at is full of that, which I'm really happy about. I see kids, and I'm always surrounded by a lot of achieving millennials and Gen Z guys and girls that are really wanting to make a place for themselves. There is ambition, but on their own terms. And that's what I think I really love, because we've all been ambitious, but sometimes your ambition has absolutely no cap. You know, you will do anything for your ambition. That's not the case with this generation, because their ambition has a boundary. You know, they will do it up to a point, and then they really want to have a good time as well. And I think they balance ambition and fun. So the city actually is doing just that right now, balancing ambition but also having lots of fun. And I think when we grew up, the pressures were much higher for some reason, because I think our parents of that generation gave us that pressure. And now the younger parents are not so pressurizing, because they don't want to be like how their parents were to them, you know. So it's like things have changed. It's like I can see the generation shift.
May I just add that, thanks Karen for saying that, because she and I often spar over this, and I keep telling her the suburbs is creativity, the great equalizer, talent. And you have that here, as opposed to just degrees and, you know, this talk about old money.
Shonali, you of course moved here much later, after you had graduated college already, and you grew up, you have an army background. Tell us a little, did you feel like an outsider when you first got here? Is that what is giving you a perspective on the city, you think, that is different or unique as an outsider?
You don't know. I think at that time you don't think so much. It's only when you grow and you have time to reflect. At that time you're only basically trying to get your hair to look good and the right lipstick shade and go out and then, you know, do your work. And so you only start making these observations when you're a bit older. But having said that, I think I wouldn't be able to compare. I mean, I can compare Delhi and here, but at that time I was hanging out with kids my age who were working. They were not people who were getting up and going to the Linden Club at 11 for breakfast and then go for a massage. So, I'm really in no position to comment on that. But I find that really wonderful about Bombay, that it really is a city that accepts all sorts of people, and everybody blends in, and people can make it on their own without having to say what their grandfather did and their father did and that sort of a thing. You make it on your own, and if you don't have it, then you're just probably, you know, you'll be invited by some reality show on TV to be in a house for a few days and that sort of a thing. Sorry, is Raj is here. But you know what I'm saying, right?
So just to sum up, there's a lot of these incredible themes in the book, so I'm sure you'll all enjoy it. But I know Karan can't stay very long, but I wanted to we will take a few questions from the audience, so just hold on to that. Before that, I thought we could do maybe a very quick rapid fire round, if that works for you guys.
Yes, totally.
You know, you set this fire. You started the fire. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like for both of you to answer immediately after I ask the question, right?
Who goes first? I mean, you know.
You do know that rapid fire has a certain kind of a process. You ask one, then you ask the other, and the one who wins gets a hamper. If none of this is happening, then I'm not playing.
How about I buy you a coffee when we're done?
Oh, you buy me a coffee. Okay. Maybe this is that kind of rapid fire.
This is that kind of rapid fire.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. All right. If you discover your partner is cheating, does it give you the right to cheat?
If I discover my partner is cheating, does it give me the right to cheat? If I'm going to cheat because my partner is cheating, then, I mean, that's just a really ridiculous knee-jerk reaction to have. You know, I think that I should cheat if I want to cheat, not because my partner is cheating. And I should not cheat even if he or she or whoever the partner is cheating. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't be determined by my partner. It should be determined by myself.
Yeah. Good answer.
I don't think it gives you the right to cheat. I think it gives you the right to set him on fire. So...
But having said that, I won't give you my thoughts on infidelity. That's a different topic altogether, and I think...
No, that is the topic, please.
No, so what I think is that it's discussed very rampantly in relationships and marriages. And many a time I'm friendly with couples, like, you know, the men and the women. And two things that I have to always say is that one thing my father has taught me, that never walk into a relationship or a marriage, because you will eventually land up losing on them. They will get back to each other and you will be dropped. So that's one thing that you've got to tell everybody, that stay away from people's relationship problems, because you might think you're helping, but actually you're not doing anything for yourself. That's one. Secondly, sometimes infidelity becomes a complete, like, drastic word, like cheating becomes, and it becomes a deal breaker for men and for women. Sometimes, and I come from a more liberal thought to infidelity, I'm like, sometimes it's important to dwell deep into that zone, just to find out the root of the issue, when there is an emotional issue attached to it. And maybe sometimes consider it like a blip or an error or a mistake, an error of judgment by the man or the woman, and not make that a deal breaker in your long-term relationship. So I think that you cannot have this kind of a reaction, according to me, that, you know, put the man on fire and like, or like, you know, really kind of diss the woman for doing what she has done. Either which way, I'm like, you've got to get into the center of the issue. If it's just cheating and infidelity for frivolousness and constantly just that, then of course there is a way to deal with that. But if there is an emotional issue attached to that infidelity, get to the core of that, discuss it, and then take your decision.
Yeah. So it could actually be a sort of learning experience or something to grow on.
I don't know what it is. It's individual to every couple, but I'm like, you cannot have a knee-jerk reaction like, you know, you cheated on me, I'm leaving you. Or like, we're done, we're divorcing each other, we're separating. I'm like, no, talk about it. Sometimes conversations help every situation.
What if it's a midlife crisis and that's leading to that?
Well, you know, even a midlife crisis is a very easy escape. Now, that on the other hand, we know when men say I'm going through a midlife crisis, that doesn't give you a right to do anything. You know, midlife crisis is something that you go through. It's like menopause. You know, you cannot make excuses for these things. You're supposed to deal with them, not suddenly use them as excuses in your life.
Well said. Okay. You gift your lover something incredibly expensive, and a week later, he breaks up with you. Do you ask for them to return it?
Not at all. Not at all. Jo gaya, wo gaya. Theek hai. Whether it's the person or the gift, it's okay.
I think he's developing a halo, so I agree with him.
Okay. Is absolute honesty necessary for a healthy relationship, or is it sometimes better to let some things secret or keep them hidden or just keep them to yourself?
You must never be absolutely honest in any relationship. Some lies are very critical for the solidarity of a relationship and the solidness of a relationship.
Like, honey, you don't look fat in this hair.
No, they're not called lies. They're called creative adjustments. You know, you have to adjust a situation with a certain information, which you can term a lie, but to me, it's not a lie. It's the reality of your existence by not lying.
So clever. I'm just going to type all of this out and that'll be the sequel to my book.
You can't. I always tell people, why do you have to give this information? If you did something that was incorrect, why are you lumbering your partner with that stress? If he or she doesn't need to know this, then do not tell them. Why then lie? Say, yes, it was lovely, missed you, thought of you, did nothing, slept early. It's okay. If it's a one-off thing, you went out partying, you had some flirty fun, but nothing really happened. Why do you want to give all that information that's going to make your partners think of all the things that you may have done which you didn't do? So just lie. Just lie. I do that with my mom all the time. She's the only like partnership I have right now. She's always thinking I'm at work post 9:30 or 10 because, you know, she feels bad when I stay away late because she thinks my health will suffer. I'm like, I was working till late and I was not doing any such thing. I lie all the time.
You know, my mom is in the front row, so thanks very much for that.
That's okay. I mean, sometimes you have to lie to mothers because mothers, let me tell you, if you tell them the truth all the time, they will hold it against you.
That's true.
You lie to mothers and lovers all the time.
That's a lovely quote.
Do you want to answer that as well, or you're just letting
question.
him win?
No, I'm letting him win.
Better to be honest or lie, that's the question.
So there are some inconvenient truths, right? Like if there are some inconvenient truths. If you say, darling, do you find me boring? And the guy says, yeah, actually you're boring. Then, I mean, you don't want to hear that. And it's not going to, you can't go to bed on that, right? So I think there are some inconvenient truths that you need to mask.
Got it. What is worse, emotional cheating or physical cheating?
Emotional cheating. Physical cheating you could even do if you have a thought in your head.
Is that considered physical cheating?
That is also physical cheating. If you're getting erotic thoughts in your head, that's also cheating. You know, so, you know.
Every man in this room is having a
So
scene
that-
with
that's
Sunny
what I
Leone
believe,
as
that-
we speak.
So acting on it, acting on that thought, and if it's just physical, that is something that you must discuss. That's what I was talking about. Emotional cheating is a larger problem. That means there is a problem in the relationship itself.
Right.
If there is emotional cheating, then there's a major issue in your relationship, and that must hit you hard. Physical cheating, you don't know what to do now. It's okay now, to each his own. Now one can't be like entirely like sad, like, you know, pretend like, you know, like it's not happening around us and that your life is a perfect, you know, detergent, which is all clean and clear. It's not like that.
Got it. Shonali?
Yeah, I share his view on that.
Okay. Last question, the rapid fire, which, by the way, he's winning completely.
But he's the king of rapid fire. He
is the
invented
king.
it. What
That's
do you
true.
think?
That is true.
Questions are more a rapid humper than a, than a hamper that I'm going to get. It's not a hamper coming away. This humper's arriving.
Okay, so I'm going to switch it up for the last
Yeah,
one. right?
really.
Yeah.
Okay. If a friend has had a really bad plastic surgery job, do you bring it up?
No. It's the worst thing you can do.
I feel like you're speaking from experience.
Yes.
Okay.
I've sometimes stare like harder and then I don't know what to do. Like currently I'm staring at you also. No, there's nothing there. Yeah,
For
all
the
good,
record.
all clear. No, but it's not fair. Unless you're really close and that person says, you know, that admits to it. But if the person is not admitting, they don't want you to know, and then why embarrass them?
Got it.
I have no filters. So I am likely to say it or just stare at their face and say that, oh, something's different about
That's
you.
the worst thing. Never do that.
Yeah, I know.
That is the worst thing you can do. It's like, you know, when people do ask you about their weight loss and you're not supposed to say that, no, well, you're looking great, you know, but I come from that school. It's like, I equate it to a screening of a film. It's like we've shown our films to so many people the day before the release. The worst are those kind of people who come and say, let me be honest with you, this was wrong, that was wrong. I'm like, dude, you can't do anything about the film. It's out in the theaters tomorrow. Just say, I love the film and walk off. What is your problem? Like, why are you telling me, giving me a big katha about how bad the film is the night before the release? I want to sleep, for heaven's sake. I have a release the next morning. But no, there'll be those, can I be honest with you? Is the worst thing people say. I'm like, no, I don't want you to be honest with me. Can you lie so I can sleep? Like, you know, those are the worst. To be honest, who are you to be honest? Keep quiet. You haven't made the film. I did something to my face. It's my face. I did it. Don't need to hear it from you.
Great. I'm taking note of that for sure the next time I come to see one of your previews. Shonali?
What was the question again? I answered it. It also depends on how many units of wine you've had when the question is addressed to you. So, you know, people feel more, can I be honest with you after a drink or two? So, it depends. Most people don't ask, but I can't lie. I mean, if you do it, I will tell you.
Okay. Again, good to know. All
We
right.
have Botox police right here.
No. If it doesn't suit her, that's it. Go do
Let
whatever
me tell you,
want.
it doesn't suit anyone.
Yeah.
But how do we tell them that? Nothing unnatural is ever going to be good. You know, so it's never going to work.
But aging gracefully, what are your views on that?
No, I mean, you
What
must...
are your views about aging gracefully? Is it overrated? In my book, I have said somewhere that aging gracefully, one character says aging gracefully is overrated. What do you feel?
No, I think if you ask me, literally if you keep this part of your body clear and this part of your body clear, you will age gracefully. There's no way. The moment you clutter these two parts of your body, there's going to be all shows on your face.
He's the life coach that I've been talked about. There's a life coach in my book. You've become that current.
With years and parenting, it's making me wonder.
I know.
Fantastic. Well, that's all the questions I have. Thank you, guys. But I'm going to open it up in case anyone in the
Briefly.
audience has a couple. We won't take very many, but if anyone does have a question, please restrict your questions
To the
to
topic
the
being
subject
this.
at
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead. Sorry, you might need to stand and ask your question.
Shonali, these topics that you were discussing. But,
Sorry, don't stand.
but I wanted to know, my question has two parts. Firstly, did you have a character?
Just loud. Never mind, I can hear you. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a particular
That
character
was
you're rooting for?
rooting for?
Yeah.
Scene in the book that you were totally...
Favorite scene?
Yeah, I think my favorite scene in the scene scene in the book is there's a big party scene where a lot of drama happens. You've read the book, so that is my favorite scene because it's quite unexpected. And a character that I was rooting for, I was rooting for the very misunderstood Trisha, who is having an affair, and who then, you know, we paint a woman with the same brush and say, she's a horrible person, she's this, she's that. And so I wanted to show that you can be a person who will cheat, but you can still be a good friend to your friends, or maybe a good mother, because I didn't want to judge her. Of course, my favorite character is Natasha, who's the protagonist, who is judging her as we speak. But you know, women have many nuances and layers, and I wanted to go beyond that and not brush them with the same stroke and place every blame at their door. Okay, I think we can wind up now. Yeah? Okay.
You are very spontaneous. I love it. I love your spontaneity. Now, you observe that there are affairs everywhere in the air. So what's the role of morality in this? And does it affect the health of the society?
I think that the role of morality again is subjective, you know. I think that you have to, as I said, when there is an extramarital relationship that may surround you, and if you deem it immoral immediately, you might be quick to kind of make that decision, because it's important to understand why that step was taken by him or by her. So to completely say that infidelity equals immorality is not something that I think I endorse or is something that I propagate as a phenomena where you talk about it, because I think that you have to understand the emotional wealth of what happened in that circumstance, and each circumstance is different from the other. And whether you talk about a sickness in society and whether it's, you know, well, I think, again, these are very drastic situations, and these are drastic reactions. You know, I think that nothing that is an emotionally intense situation in a couple's life or in a family's life can ever kind of mar or jar the health of our society. Emotions can always just actually add to our society. They can never really kind of, you know, do anything to harm it. So I think by thinking like that, you're kind of regressing in terms of thought and practice, and I hope it's not done. I mean, that's not fair to say there is real love everywhere. Why segregate show business and you know, just say that there's no love? People are separating and going through relationship traumas everywhere, not just in the film fraternity. I think it's because the fraternity is discussed a lot because it's always in your face. You know, it's in the papers, it's on social media. But you'll be surprised to know what's happening around us, not just in the movies. There's a far more active zone of relationship trauma around us than just in the fraternity. So we have to look at it as a holistic situation and not just an individualistic one.
Social media today has become a double-edged sword where whatever you write or whatever video you put out, it can have different connotations.
Thank you. I know where you're going with that. Yes, social media has its pluses and minuses, and it's a boon and a curse. And it's a boon when you have to reach out to millions of people and connect with the world and whatever is happening in it. It's a curse when it's misused, when it's misunderstood, and when it's unnecessarily kind of added loops of negativity to it and attached to it for no reason. But it's a reality of our existence. We have to envelop it, and hopefully some of the negatives eventually get subsided by all the positivity that the world must have.
So I'm just going to wind up here. I know he's very interesting, very engaging, and very wise. But this can go on because I think we all have enough we want to ask him. But he has to go, so I don't want to actually take up more of his time than we already have. Is that okay? Okay, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
and all
everybody.
The best, Shonali. I hope that the book really rocks. You've already met with such glorious and glowing reviews. Thank you so much, Divya. Thank you for doing this. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for making the time. Give it up for Shonali Shroff, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. I'll just see him off outside and come back.